First half of the script: The rise of the Aztec Empire. Geography and climate. The Aztec Empire was located in a wide elevation valley, named the Valley of Mexico, and settled on a marshy island on a lake known as Lake Texcoco. The Aztec Empire was surrounded by lakes that provided fish, potable water, and reeds that the Aztecs used for thatching and weaving. The climate was known to be mild. Tenochtitlan. Tenochtitlan, originally known as Mexico Tenochtitlan, was a large Mexica city-state that became the capital of the Aztecs and is now what we know as the center of Mexico City. On June 20th, 1325, the city was built on an island in what was Lake Texcoco. Social structure. The Aztec social structure was an organized structure to show the people with the most power and the people with the least power. On top was the king. He had pretty much all control over everything. King would usually come from a relative from the past king or a noble if the king had no relatives. Next in line was priest, usually someone very important to the religion and was a very important person altogether. Nobles, they were like the government. They ruled over city-states and commanded the army. The common people known in the Aztec social classes were also referred to as farmers, warriors, and craftsmen. Later on throughout Aztec history, they had a higher place in the social structure. Finally, there were the slaves. Aztec people becoming slaves by selling themselves into slavery to pay off debt or as punishments for crimes. Slavery also had certain rights. For instance, they were not mistreated by their owners and could buy their freedom. Daily life. The daily life of the Aztecs had been said that they were religious, death-obsessed, and fierce. The kind of homes that the Aztecs lived in were common with every family, noble or commoner. Every home were split up into 4 areas and was made entirely out of adobe. For the common people's clothing, the men wore a single piece of cloth wrapped around the hips, known as loincloth, and for women, they wore long skirts and blouses. Poor people, though, usually wove their own cloth. Making clothing was set as the woman's responsibility. For food, the main staple of the Aztec diet was maize, a type of corn. They grounded the maize into flour to make tortillas. Other foods in their diets were beans and squash. Achievements. There was many achievements that the Aztecs made, but none were as famous as the Aztec calendar. The Aztecs used 2 calendars, one for religion events and festivals, and the other for tracking times. Every 52 years, the 2 calendars would start on the same day. The Aztecs were afraid that the world would end on this day. They performed the new fire ceremony on this day. Another really popular invention made by the Aztecs was their number system, which contained dots that were used to represent quantities up to 20. A flag was used to represent 20, repeating quantities up to 400. Second half, fall of the Aztec Empire. The Aztecs, though were powerful, were soon to be killed by the Spanish in an unfair battle. Some reasons why they lost came down to how strong their weapons were. Why they got into battle in the first place. Time to talk about why they got into the battle in the first place. You see, there was a Spanish conquistador named Hernan Cortez. Hernan Cortez led the expedition into Mexico. While doing so, he encountered the Aztecs. The Aztecs, not knowing any better, treated him as a god, and he took it as an advantage to capture the leader and assassinate him. The Aztecs were furious, wanting to start a war. Well, soon to know, they were no match. This was due to many reasons, but one of the more major ones were smallpox. This was brought over from the Spanish and was infecting the Aztecs. Why the Spanish wasn't affected was simply because they were used to it. This disease was weakening them in forces because they were getting sick and were dying. But on top of that, the Spanish had better weapons. At the time, they had guns, also known as harquebus, an early musket, as well as horses and swords. This is more effective than the Aztecs' weapons. Then, of course, to add on to that, there is the fact that the Spanish befriended a tribe around the Aztec Empire. The tribe's name was the Tlaxcala, and they helped the Spanish defeat the Aztecs, and that's what this whole battle came down to. This was an unfair battle, in my opinion. Anyway, outro. Thanks for listening to Collin, thanks for listening to me ramble on about the Aztecs, and yeah, thanks for listening in general.
I helped write like half of the script, and I just licked my computer, and it tastes awful.
Anyway, so yeah, I read and he edited. Thanks for listening.